This is Venezuela, a country that was once one of the leading exporters of oil as a founding member of OPEC. A country once so rich in culture, drawing inspiration from the Spanish, the Africans, and the indigenous Venezuelans for their art, literature, music, and cuisine. With a variety of ethnic groups, a variety of languages, with their constitution recognizing over 30 official languages, and a solid and growing economy, Venezuela has now become riddled with crime, hyperinflation, starvation, massive emigration, and political corruption. In the span of less than 2 decades, Venezuela went from a promising future to the bottom of a very dark hole, with the citizens of the South American country not seeing any escape in sight. No light at the end of the tunnel. But how did Venezuela end up in such a precarious position? Let's take a step back. Back to 1999, where Hugo Chavez became president of Venezuela as leader of the Fifth Republic movement political party, a point that many historians consider the beginning of the Venezuelan crisis.
The beginning of this sad reality for Venezuela can be traced back to December 6, 1998, with the election of the leader of the Fifth Republic movement political party, later called the United Socialist Party of Venezuela. Hugo Chavez, a military officer who has led a coup d'etat against one of the previous presidents of Venezuela in 1992, Carlos Andrés Pérez. Hugo Chavez did not necessarily do anything deliberately wrong to cause this crisis, but was more so to the very limited ways that Venezuela was making money. In fact, Hugo Chavez presented the Bolivarian missions with a goal to provide public services that would help with the famine, poverty, and social conditions at the time. These policies and action plans in fact worked, and according to the UN Index, even improved the general life quality of Venezuelan population. Poverty was cut 20% between 2002 and 2008. Thousands of medical clinics were opened for the poor, housing subsidies were provided. The Organization of American States even reported that illiteracy was on a decline and social advances were made within the country. Hugo Chavez, however, was not prepared for one possibility, the one event that would send all his social programs crashing to the ground: a decrease in demand and price of oil. 2010. With such a high demand of oil and being one of the main exporters in the world, Chavez started over-relying on money coming in from these exports to fund Bolivian missions and cutting back on production of other goods, especially food, due to how easy it was to import these resources from other countries. To make matters worse, the government created CADIVI, now called CENCOEX, an agency responsible for foreign currency control. However, these currency controls were too strict, forbidding the dollar from being used within Venezuela under certain contexts. Food production thus kept diminishing, and the public services offered by government were no longer working effectively. In 2010, Hugo Chavez declared an economic war. The government affirms that none of these policies or actions are behind the shortage and economic collapse, blaming the CIA and the US primarily for the shortcoming. However, for Venezuela, the worst was yet to come. March 5th, 2013, Hugo Chavez passes away from cancer after it metastasized his lungs, causing respiratory failure. He was just appointed by his third term and was about to be sworn in January of the same year. But this was postponed due to his poor health. At this time, a couple of years after the official declaration from Chavez indicating that Venezuela was in an economic war, the real effects of the crisis started to take hold. The oil glut of 2014 to 2015, which was caused by an oversupply of oil in the world, has started to appear, thus killing the primary source of income for the country. The whole Bolivarian mission that Chavez had created in the early 2000s started crumbling, due to the fact that he had put all his eggs in the same basket, and lots of money that was used to form these social programs were from the oil industry.
March 8th, 2013. With the death of Hugo Chavez still looming, elections took place to find a new president of Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro, leader of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, defeated Enrique Capriles Radonsky with a 1.5% margin to gain the role of head of government. Maduro decided to maintain the majority of the policies put forward by Chavez. The situation got more and more dire in Venezuela. Over 70% of food is imported into the country, and they became so dependent on imports that come 2014, they couldn't afford to do so anymore, due to the 2010s oil glut. This slowly led to, in 2019, over 94% of the population being considered in poverty, with close to nothing to eat according to a recent UN report. In the medical domain, over half of the hospitals stopped performing surgeries due to the lack of funds and resources. During this time, the chikungunya mosquito virus started spreading in Venezuela, with estimates saying that up to 117,000 Venezuelans could be infected with the virus, but the government was only officially saying 36,000 were infected. Regardless, with no way of getting the proper medication, this virus is still an issue in the country today. With mortality rates climbing, suicide rates climbing, the economy falling, housing being less and less available, it's obvious that things are not improving under the Maduro government. This is where the Lima Group comes in.
On August 8, 2017, the Lima Group was created. The Lima Group, a multilateral body and an international collaboration between 14 countries including Canada, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and Costa Rica, among many others. With the set of declaration made upon the creation of the group, it's clear that the Lima Group's main objective is the peace resolution of issue related to the Venezuelan crisis. Their main concern is to prevent the further breakdown of democratic order within the country, but they also focus on providing humanitarian aid, preventing human rights violations, and the release of political prisoners. It is still too soon to truly gauge whether or not the group is a success, but it is the biggest international initiative thus far to put an end to this crisis.
December 2016. The inflation rate is now higher than 800%, expecting to hit 1.35 million% by 2018. An estimated 1.5 million Venezuelans have immigrated. The National Assembly, the unicameral de jure legislature of Venezuela, holds its elections. An opposing party to Maduro's Socialist Party takes majority power. The National Assembly starts to become a nuisance to Maduro's power over Venezuela. On August 4, 2017, he creates the National Constituent Assembly, who rewrites the Venezuelan constitution and nullifies all powers the National Assembly has in the government, thus making it an unconstitutional political group with no grounds. The National Constituent Assembly is comprised of government supporters, thus working in Maduro's favor. In the month of February 2018, Maduro holds elections 4 months before the prescribed date. This election is considered to be one of the most corrupt elections in Venezuelan history. Many major oppositional parties were prohibited from partaking. Maduro was accused of being a dictator, and politicians within and outside of Venezuela did not agree with how the elections were run. These elections were thought to be invalid.
January 10th, 2019. After the controversial 2018 election that left many Venezuelans feeling like the elections were rigged and a failure, the National Assembly declares Maduro an usurper and declares the opposition leader, Juan Guaido, as the new president of Venezuela. He's sworn in officially on January 25th, 2020. Of course, Maduro didn't step down from his position. The Supreme Tribunal of Justice, the highest court of law in Venezuela, fires back and accuses Juan Guaido of being an usurper himself, and reminds him that the National Assembly is unconstitutional due to Maduro's creation of the National Constituent Assembly in 2018. This left the country with 2 leaders. But who was the official president? On the international level, over 60 countries recognize Guaido as the proper president of Venezuela. However, the international community is divided in two, with a majority of Western and Latin American countries defending Guaido as president, and countries such as Russia, China, Cuba, and Turkey recognizing and defending Maduro as the real president of Venezuela. However, this political turmoil was merely just a fraction of the ongoing crisis that continued to develop in 2019. Guaido insisted that humanitarian aid be brought into the city. However, the military was majorly behind Maduro and prevented such aid from entering the country on multiple accounts from fear that the CIA had plans to get rid of Maduro. Tensions were at an all-time high and resources were at an all-time low. Since March 2019, total countrywide electrical blackouts have taken place on the regular. The water systems were also down just as often due to these electrical blackouts. The UN declared that the preventable diseases such as malaria, measles, hepatitis A, tuberculosis, and many others were on the rise in the country, with over 2.8 million citizens requiring medical attention that just no longer existed in a proper capacity in the country. The one positive of 2019 for Venezuela is the slight economic increase, with Maduro finally putting an end to policies set forth by Chavez, including price and currency controls. Maduro finally allowed the dollarization of Venezuela, and this helped boost the economy. Sources state that the government obtained an increase in money from illegal means, such as legal mines, drugs. However, the government has never confirmed nor denied these accusations. January 5th, 2020. Even with the governmental image of the National Assembly being very poor, the National Assembly would still hold its elections, with Juan Guaido's leadership role up for grabs. If two leaders fighting over the proper presidency of the country wasn't enough, this day marked a new ripple in the political corruption and turmoil of Venezuela. The military prevented Juan Guaido from attending his own election. Thus, a new leader of the National Assembly was named in political rival Luis Parra. Did Guaido step down from fighting over the presidency then? No. In fact, once he realized they couldn't make it into the assembly, he decided to hold his own meeting with over 100 politicians in attendance who voted him as leader of the National Assembly. The head of government is now in a three-way standoff, with Maduro and Guaido fighting over the presidency, while Guaido has a new issue to deal with, as there are now two official leaders in the National Assembly as well, with Parra announcing soon later that he deserves to be president as well. These events lead us to today. Even though many bills, international projects, organizations, and other initiatives have tried and failed to try and hoist and deviate Venezuela's current path in the international community, we believe, along with our partnership with the Rideau Institute, that there are still plenty of innovative plans and solutions that can be brought forth by the Canadian government in conjunction with our partner to hopefully attenuate the crisis in Venezuela and provide the country with the foundation necessary to gain some momentum in rebuilding. However, the first step of this process of solving the crisis is making the general public aware that this issue even exists and ensuring there's a general understanding of the problem at hand. The Venezuelan crisis doesn't get the necessary attention from main news outlets, and we believe such an issue could be more easily resolved if it got the attention it deserved. We, on the behalf of the Rideau Institute, believe that this video can be the first step in accomplishing this. More importantly, we believe that this can be the spark that ignites the dim but ever-growing light at the end of the tunnel for all of Venezuela.